Why do we humans doubt the very moments that should bring us together? The question lingers softly in the night, settling over the quiet like a grain of moon dust drifting through a beam of pale light. It's a strange truth of our species. We reach extraordinary heights, and yet our minds sometimes circle back to the thought that perhaps the impossible was never achieved at all. That tension between wonder and doubt follows us everywhere, from ancient myths whispered around campfires to digital rumors spreading at the speed of a swipe. You're here now in a calm corner of the evening, wrapped in stillness, breathing at your own pace. The noise of the world fades a little as you listen, and the glow of the moon, the same moon that sparked a million hopes and a million conspiracies, hangs quietly overhead. In this peaceful moment, it becomes easier to step back from the rush of opinions, the pull of headlines, and the echo of heated arguments. You're safe here, drifting through a space where curiosity is gentle instead of loud. There's something deeply human about the question of whether we really set foot on the moon. Not because the doubt is new, it isn't, but because it reveals how we navigate trust, evidence, memory, and the stories we tell ourselves. When celebrities repeat these ideas on global platforms, or when old claims resurface across social media, it becomes a window into our collective psychology. Behind the conspiracy lies a far richer story, one made of Cold War pressure, engineering brilliance, public fear, breathtaking risk, and the sheer audacity it took for humans to attempt something no one had ever done before. And before we wander deeper into this journey, through history, emotion, physics, and the myths that orbit around them, if these quiet explorations help you unwind or simply end your day with a little wonder, I'd be truly grateful if you left a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Thank you for being part of this small universe we're building together. As the night stretches gently ahead, let's follow the thread that leads from a single comment on a reality show to the largest scientific effort in human history. The path we're about to drift along is filled with both misunderstandings and miracles. And it all begins with a simple, curious question. The quiet pulse of doubt has always followed humanity, almost like a shadow attached to our collective imagination. Even in eras filled with discovery and progress, a small voice persists, whispering that perhaps the world is not what it seems. This gentle yet stubborn skepticism isn't a flaw. It's part of what makes us human. It pushes us to question, to probe, to search for meaning. But in moments where truth requires trust, this same instinct can turn against us, shaping illusions that feel as real as memory itself. Psychologically, the moon landing conspiracy thrives because the event was so staggering, so vast, that it feels more like mythology than history. Our brains evolved to understand fire, storms, hunger, and shelter, not giant rockets, complex orbital mechanics, or humans floating in the vacuum of space. The scale of Apollo creates a cognitive gap, a distance between what we've personally seen and what we must accept through evidence and collective testimony. And in that gap, doubt can take root like a seed seeking fertile soil. The mind loves simplicity, preferring stories that fit neatly inside the boundaries of intuition. And the moon, hanging quietly in the night sky, can make the idea of a hoax feel oddly comfortable to those who struggle to reconcile imagination with reality. Conspiracies offer narratives with clear villains and hidden intentions, which can feel easier to grasp than the messy, uncertain nature of scientific achievement. In a strange way, believing the impossible didn't happen can feel safer than accepting that humanity truly did something extraordinary. Beneath this tendency lies a deeper longing for agency. When people feel overwhelmed by political tension, rapid technological change, or global uncertainty, conspiracy theories offer a sense of control. as if uncovering a secret truth restores balance in a confusing world. It's not arrogance, it's a protective instinct. The mind tries to anchor itself by forming connections, even if they're fragile or false. And during the intense era of the Apollo missions, emotional tension set the stage for these doubts long before the internet existed. The moon landing also sits at the crossroads of wonder and fear, two emotions that often blur into one another. Standing before a moment of such historical magnitude, some people instinctively retreat from awe. It's as if the mind whispers, "This is too big, too perfect, something must be wrong." That inner recoil turns into suspicion, a psychological shield against feeling small in the face of human ingenuity. And with each generation, that suspicion reshapes itself, carried forward like a quiet echo. Science tells us that humans constantly seek patterns, even when none exist, a phenomenon known as apophenia. It's why we see shapes in clouds, faces on Mars, and meaning in coincidences. When applied to grainy Apollo photos, strange shadows, or missing stars, this same instinct leads people to interpret natural optical quirks as signs of manipulation. What begins as a harmless observation slowly becomes a theory, and the theory becomes an identity, especially when reinforced by others who feel the same way. Just as starlight bends across the curves of space, our memories and interpretations bend across the curves of personal experience. For someone who grew up hearing conflicting stories, or who distrusts authoritative institutions, the moon landing conspiracy becomes more than a claim. It becomes a reflection of deeper emotional wounds. Doubt, in this context, is not about science. It's about belonging, trust, and the fragile structure of belief itself. These inner forces move quietly, shaping how we interpret the world. The rise of the internet transformed those private uncertainties into global narratives. In the early 2000s, forums and message boards provided fertile ground for ideas that once lived only in the margins. Suddenly, a single question could echo across millions of screens, gaining weight simply through repetition. Algorithms boosted content that provoked strong emotional reactions, confusion, outrage, fascination, unknowingly amplifying conspiracies into cultural storms. The digital age gave doubt a megaphone it never had before. As more voices entered the conversation, misinformation became entangled with entertainment. Videos mixing dramatic music, low-resolution photos, and exaggerated claims created a hybrid form of storytelling that blurred fact and fiction. For many viewers, the emotional resonance mattered more than the accuracy. The moon landing ceased to be a historical event and became a stage where humanity projected fears, fantasies, and frustrations. In this new landscape, truth became a quieter presence, easily overshadowed. Over time, conspiracy content evolved into a kind of performance, where creators competed not for evidence but for attention. The more sensational the claim, the more traction it gained. Meanwhile, the real story, the thousands of scientists, engineers, technicians, and astronauts who risked everything, began to fade into the background. Their work, grounded in meticulous calculations and tireless dedication, struggled to compete with the thrilling pull of suspicion packaged as revelation. Yet, even in the chaos of doubt, there's beauty in understanding why people think this way. It reminds us of the delicate balance between knowledge and imagination, between scientific truth and the emotions that sway us. Humans are storytelling creatures, and when a story feels too monumental to grasp, our minds sometimes reshape it into something that feels more manageable. The moon landing, ironically, is almost too magnificent for its own good. The truth, illuminated gently, is that conspiracies flourish where distance exists. Emotional distance, educational distance, or distance from credible information. And the Apollo missions create distance in every direction: technological, political, cultural, psychological. They belong to an era that feels both impossibly distant and intensely relevant, an era whose complexity still ripples through the present. To doubt the moon landing is, on some level, to question whether humanity is truly capable of greatness. As we drift deeper into the night, it becomes easier to step away from the noise and look at these doubts not as threats, but as windows into the human mind. Understanding them doesn't mean agreeing with them. It means recognizing the emotional landscape beneath them. When seen through this gentler lens, even skepticism becomes a part of the larger story, one woven from curiosity, longing, fear, hope, and the quiet desire to make sense of a world that often feels overwhelming. And now, with the psychological ground laid before us, the journey shifts. Ahead lies not rumor or speculation, but the astonishing real history of the Apollo era. A history shaped by politics, rivalry, and dreams so bold they stretched the limits of human imagination. As the night deepens, we'll step slowly into that past and watch the story unfold. Doubt has a long lineage, stretching back through centuries of human conflict, discovery, and storytelling. Before it attached itself to space travel, it flourished around explorers crossing oceans, scientists describing invisible forces, and inventors unveiling machines that seemed to defy nature. Every breakthrough that expanded the boundaries of understanding carried a shadow of disbelief. The moon landing conspiracy is simply the modern descendant of a very old instinct, the tension between wonder and suspicion that shapes how humanity receives the unfamiliar. During the mid-20th century, that tension intensified as technological progress accelerated far beyond the pace of ordinary life. Radios, televisions, nuclear energy, jet engines, satellites, each advancement arrived with breathtaking speed, altering society before people had time to fully comprehend the change. In that whirlwind, some individuals felt left behind, as if the world was sprinting into a future they hadn't asked for. Against this backdrop, the idea that the moon landing might be staged offered a kind of psychological refuge, a pause button on an overwhelming timeline. The Cold War further amplified these emotions. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a rivalry that permeated every aspect of culture, from education and entertainment to technology and media. Propaganda saturated daily life, shaping perceptions through carefully constructed narratives. Living under a constant cloud of secrecy and fear, it's understandable that many citizens developed a natural skepticism toward official claims. When governments hid so much, it wasn't difficult to imagine they could hide even more. Political trust was fragile, splintered by worries about espionage, nuclear weapons, and global instability. The anxiety of that era made people hyper-aware of deception, fueling a mindset where questioning everything felt like a form of protection. Within that environment, large scientific achievements were sometimes interpreted through a lens of suspicion rather than celebration. The moon landing, occurring right in the center of this tension, became vulnerable to exactly that kind of reinterpretation. Adding to the complexity, the Apollo missions unfolded at a time when televised media was still relatively new. Many viewers watched astronauts walking on the lunar surface with the same technology they used to watch movies and staged performances. Without years of experience distinguishing authentic live broadcasts from cinematic illusions, it was easy for some to blur the line between documentary and spectacle. The surreal imagery only intensified this confusion, making the event feel both miraculous and strangely theatrical. Cultural myths also played a role. For decades, science fiction had shaped the public imagination, portraying space travel as a realm where special effects and studio sets crafted entire worlds. When real astronauts suddenly stepped into that same aesthetic landscape, grey dust, barren horizons, stark shadows, some viewers unconsciously connected the visuals to fiction rather than reality. The moon appeared too similar to Hollywood's imagination, creating an unexpected psychological overlap. As the years passed, other conspiracy theories emerged alongside the moon landing suspicion, forming a growing ecosystem of doubt. These narratives thrived not because people lacked intelligence, but because they sought meaning in chaotic times. When societal trust eroded, alternative explanations offered the comfort of clarity, even if they were flawed. The moon landing hoax became a symbolic question, representing deeper uncertainties about power, truth, and the pace of change. Historical patterns show that conspiracies flourish most when official institutions fail to communicate effectively. NASA, composed largely of engineers, scientists, and specialists, often struggled to explain complex information in a relatable way. Their technical language, precise and methodical, sometimes created emotional distance with the public. In that gap, storytellers with simpler, though incorrect, narratives found an audience eager for straightforward explanations. Another factor shaping public perception was the human longing for spectacle. Grand events demand grand interpretations, and the moon landing was among the grandest achievements in modern history. For some, the magnitude of that success felt unbelievable, as if humanity had leaped too far, too fast. When an achievement seems larger than life, skepticism becomes a way to shrink it back to a familiar scale. People sometimes doubt what they secretly feel humbled by. Even small inconsistencies in communication contributed to doubt. Minor changes in wording between different reports, slight variations in footage due to broadcast methods, or gaps in public understanding were sometimes mistaken for signs of deception. This is a common psychological effect. When people are unsure what they're looking at, they fill the void with assumptions, especially when those assumptions align with existing fears or frustrations. Social dynamics played a role as well. Conspiracy theories often offer a sense of community among those who believe them. Sharing doubts creates belonging, a bond formed through the thrill of uncovering hidden truths. During eras of social unrest, that camaraderie can be comforting. The moon landing hoax didn't spread just because people believed it, but because believing it made them feel part of something larger. Misinterpretations of photographic artifacts also fueled early suspicions. Shadows appearing odd due to uneven terrain, stars not visible due to camera exposure, and the peculiar behavior of dust in a vacuum. All of these details confused viewers unfamiliar with the physics of lunar environments. Without accessible explanations, these natural phenomena were transformed into evidence, like puzzle pieces arranged to form an unintended picture. The role of entertainment cannot be ignored. Sensational documentaries, tabloid headlines, and exaggerated claims capitalized on the public's curiosity. Some creators prioritized drama over accuracy, constructing narratives that mimicked the structure of mystery thrillers. These stories weren't designed to inform, they were designed to captivate. And in captivating people, they planted ideas that lingered long after the credits rolled. As decades passed, the conspiracy adapted and survived by evolving with new technology. Early internet forums allowed individuals to share theories anonymously, creating an echo chamber where doubts amplified, like reflections bouncing in a mirror. Each reinterpretation added layers, turning small misconceptions into elaborate frameworks. For some, these theories provided order during a time when society felt increasingly unpredictable. What keeps the moon landing conspiracy alive today is not evidence but emotion. People don't cling to such beliefs because they hold information, they cling because the belief holds them. It gives shape to uncertainties they cannot articulate, transforming confusion into a narrative that feels coherent. Understanding this shows that dismissing believers outright solves nothing. The deeper issue is emotional, not factual. And yet, beneath all this psychological complexity lies the simple truth. The Apollo missions were real. They were the result of immense effort, sacrifice, and ingenuity. But to appreciate that fully, one must step into the world that created them. And that world, shaped by rivalry, ambition, hope, and fear, is the next part of our journey. Ahead of us now are the origins of the space race itself, the volatile political environment that turned the moon into a battlefield of prestige and possibility. As we drift forward, the threads of history begin to intertwine with the quiet motivations that drove humanity toward the stars. Long before the world argued about whether the moon landing was real, a deeper story was already unfolding, a story of fear, ambition, and global tension. The origins of the Apollo program lie not in peaceful curiosity, but in an unspoken competition that stretched across continents and ideologies. The Cold War carved a line through human history, shaping decisions, dreams, and scientific paths with a quiet pressure that rarely made its way into public conversations. To understand why we went to the moon, we must first understand the atmosphere that made leaving Earth feel necessary. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, the world stood on the edge of uncertainty as two superpowers rose from the rubble of World War II. The United States and the Soviet Union didn't simply disagree on politics. They embodied opposing visions of human destiny. Each believed its survival depended on surpassing the other in every domain: military strength, technology, culture, and even the hearts of nations watching from afar. This rivalry planted the seed that would grow into the space race, a competition unlike any humanity had ever witnessed. Tension deepened as nuclear weapons matured. The terrifying possibility of destruction reshaped global consciousness. Every scientific development mattered. Every technological advancement carried symbolic weight. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957, the shockwave spread instantly. A metallic sphere the size of a beach ball became the loudest alarm bell of the 20th century. It declared to the world that the Soviets had crossed a threshold first, leaving the United States staring upward in disbelief. The psychological impact of Sputnik cannot be overstated. It wasn't just a satellite, it was a message written in orbit. If the Soviet Union could place an object above the atmosphere, they could theoretically place anything there, including weapons. Overnight, the sky transformed from a familiar backdrop into a stage where power was displayed and fear was amplified. Households listened to the faint radio beeps transmitted from space, hearing not just sound, but a shift in the balance of global influence. American political leaders reacted with urgency, convinced that falling behind in space meant falling behind everywhere. Schools restructured curriculums to prioritize math and science. Funding for research skyrocketed. Laboratories that once lacked resources suddenly overflowed with ambition. The competitive flame ignited, reshaping institutions and scientific priorities. What began as a geopolitical concern quickly evolved into a national mission that reached into classrooms, homes, and imaginations. NASA emerged from this pressure cooker of concern and aspiration. Founded in 1958, the agency was tasked with unifying scattered scientific efforts into a single, coordinated push towards space exploration. Engineers, physicists, pilots, and visionaries from various backgrounds came together beneath a shared banner. Their goal extended far beyond prestige. It was to unlock the secrets above the atmosphere and claim a foothold on the frontier of the unknown. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union wasn't standing still. Their space program achieved milestone after milestone, each one reverberating across the world. They launched the first animal into orbit, followed by the first man, Yuri Gagarin, whose flight in 1961 electrified humanity. The first woman, Valentina Tereshkova, soon followed. Each achievement widened the gap and intensified the competition. The United States found itself in a perpetual state of catching up, studying every Soviet success to understand how to surpass it. This rivalry extended far beyond science. It was woven into speeches, advertising, films, and conversations. Every milestone in space was interpreted not only as discovery, but as proof of ideological superiority. Space became a symbolic battlefield. Winning there meant more than reaching the moon. It meant shaping global perception. Governments poured resources into programs meant to inspire pride and quell fear. The people watching from Earth experienced a blend of awe, uncertainty, and national tension. President John F. Kennedy stepped into this moment with the bold proclamation in 1961. His speech before Congress called for the United States to land a man on the moon and return him safely before the decade ended. It was an extraordinary commitment, considering the country had barely achieved suborbital flight at the time. Yet that monumental promise unified millions, turning the moon from a distant dream into a tangible objective. Kennedy's declaration wasn't just political, it was poetic, stirring a generation to look upward with renewed determination. Behind the scenes, the pressure was immense. Scientists worked under tight deadlines, balancing innovation with risk. Every decision carried weight as the eyes of the world tracked progress relentlessly. The engineering challenges were staggering. No nation had ever designed machines capable of leaving Earth's gravity, traveling hundreds of thousands of kilometers, and landing safely on another celestial body. Even explaining these goals to the public required imagination, as the language for describing such feats hardly existed. Yet the challenges didn't discourage the teams, they fueled them. Laboratories buzzed with creative energy. Engineers scribbled solutions on chalkboards, napkins, and scraps of paper. The complexity of the mission forced them to invent completely new technologies, advanced computer systems, navigation methods, communication networks, materials resistant to extreme temperatures, and engines capable of precise and powerful thrust. Every triumph arrived through trial and error, with failure treated as instruction rather than a setback. Outside these laboratories, society followed every development with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The media covered rocket tests, astronaut training, and political speeches with an intensity that bordered on ritualistic. Children imagined becoming explorers of the cosmos, while artists painted visions of lunar cities. The era blended science with imagination, grounding dreams in the growing evidence that reaching the moon might actually be possible. Yet woven into all this excitement was a quieter emotion seldom discussed openly: fear. The space race wasn't merely a contest of technological brilliance. It was a reflection of humanity's uncertainty about the future. Nuclear threats darkened the horizon, and the world felt fragile. Reaching the moon carried symbolic meaning, a promise that human ingenuity could rise above destruction. The moon landing became a psychological lifeline, a testament to what humanity could accomplish even in the darkest of times. Despite the tension, cooperation occasionally flickered through the rivalry. Scientists on both sides respected one another's achievements, even as their governments competed. Some corresponded quietly, sharing insights about physics and engineering. Their exchanges revealed a truth often hidden beneath political noise. The desire to explore wasn't exclusive to any ideology. Curiosity transcended borders. The quest to understand the universe belonged to everyone. This intricate mix of fear, ambition, hope, and rivalry shaped the path that eventually led to the Apollo missions. It created an environment where tremendous resources flowed into a singular goal, weaving together countless threads of expertise. The moon landing was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of decades of geopolitical tension, scientific perseverance, and emotional complexity. To appreciate what happened in 1969, we must see the landscape that shaped it. As we move forward, the narrative deepens. The next stage of our journey leads into the engineering marvels that made lunar travel possible, and the challenges that nearly derailed the dream at every step. Understanding those struggles brings us closer to the truth behind one of humanity's most extraordinary accomplishments. The moon landing was built on thousands of small decisions, each one made by people who understood that even a minor error could unravel the entire mission. Every bolt, every line of code, every calculation held its own kind of gravity. The Apollo program became a monumental experiment in collective precision, a demonstration of how human ingenuity functions when countless minds converge toward a single unreachable point in the sky. Before any astronaut could take a step on lunar dust, engineers had to build machines that could survive the unforgiving conditions of space. One of the earliest challenges was designing a rocket capable of lifting a human spacecraft beyond Earth's gravitational grip. The Saturn V became the answer, standing taller than a 36-story building and producing over 7 million pounds of thrust. It was a controlled explosion more powerful than any object humanity had ever intentionally constructed. Creating it required new alloys, new guidance systems, and new manufacturing methods. Even the facilities that built the Saturn V had to be invented from scratch, because nothing like it had existed before. The engines themselves demanded extraordinary craftsmanship. Each of the 5 F1 engines used on the first stage had to operate with perfect synchronization while burning enormous amounts of fuel every second. Engineers spent years overcoming combustion instability, a phenomenon where oscillations inside the engine could cause catastrophic failure. Countless test firings shook the ground like artificial earthquakes. Many attempts failed, but each failure provided data, turning chaos into understanding until the engines roared with stable, predictable power. Navigation was another frontier that strained human imagination. Astronauts traveling to the moon would need to maintain precise trajectories across nearly 400,000 kilometers, with no room for major deviations. The Apollo Guidance Computer, built by MIT's Instrumentation Laboratory, became one of the earliest digital computers designed for real-time spacecraft control. It introduced groundbreaking ideas such as integrated circuits, priority-based tasking, and compact memory systems. Its development pushed the boundaries of computing and paved the way for the digital technologies that define modern life. Life support systems required equal innovation. Astronauts would be exposed to vacuum, extreme temperature changes, and cosmic radiation. Engineers designed suits that functioned like miniature spacecraft, capable of maintaining pressure, regulating temperature, and allowing movement on an alien surface. The backpack systems provided oxygen, filtration, and cooling, all while being lightweight enough for astronauts to walk on low-gravity terrain. These suits represented a delicate balance between protection and flexibility, blending textile design with advanced mechanical engineering. Inside the lunar module, conditions were even more demanding. The craft had to support 2 astronauts, land with precision, and then lift off from the moon to rendezvous with the command module in orbit. It had no aerodynamic shape because it was never meant to fly in atmosphere. Sheets of metal thin enough to dent with a finger formed its outer skin. Every part of the lunar module followed a single rule: remove unnecessary mass. The result was a strange-looking machine that embodied pure function, the product of intense focus on physics and efficiency. The testing process for these systems was relentless. NASA ran simulations, stress tests, and full-scale rehearsals under conditions meant to mimic the brutal environment of space. Astronauts practiced in neutral buoyancy pools, desert landscapes, and vacuum chambers. Controllers in Houston rehearsed crisis scenarios repeatedly. They practiced responses to computer alarms, electrical failures, communication dropouts, fuel shortages, and landing deviations. Every possibility was explored because ignoring even one could mean losing a crew. Despite this exhaustive preparation, tragedy still arrived. The Apollo 1 fire in 1967 claimed the lives of Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee during a ground test. The accident shattered the program's confidence, revealing critical design flaws and procedural mistakes. Yet their sacrifice reshaped NASA's engineering culture, leading to massive redesigns of wiring, materials, hatches, and safety protocols. The setback was profound, but it forged a new commitment to resilience and detail. After Apollo 1, teams across the country re-evaluated every subsystem with renewed seriousness. Engineers who previously debated technical decisions now worked with sharper focus, aware that real lives hung on every choice. The redesigned command module became significantly safer and more reliable. The tragedy deepened the emotional weight of the mission, but it also strengthened the resolve to honor the crew by ensuring no similar event would happen again. Training astronauts became an equally important component. They were taught celestial navigation, geology, emergency procedures, and spacecraft operations. Simulators recreated the cockpit experience with astonishing accuracy, using physical motion platforms and complex software to mimic real flight dynamics. Astronauts practiced docking, landing, and re-entry until their reactions felt instinctive. The rigor of preparation underscored the mission's complexity. This wasn't a display or a stunt. It was a journey into a place no human had touched. Communication posed its own challenges. Signals between Earth and the Moon needed to travel across vast distances. Delayed by over a second, ground networks spread across multiple continents relayed data, voice, and telemetry with remarkable precision. Those systems relied on enormous radio antennas, meticulously aligned to track spacecraft in motion. Synchronizing global communication infrastructure required coordination between NASA facilities, international partners, and independent observatories. Another obstacle was the question of landing. The surface of the Moon is uneven, covered with fine regolith that behaves like powder with sharp edges. Testing how landing legs would interact with this unfamiliar environment demanded creative experimentation. Engineers dropped prototypes into simulated lunar soil, evaluating how they compressed, bounced, or slipped. Every landing scenario was studied, from gentle descents to emergency touchdowns, until the final configuration inspired confidence. The final assembly of the Apollo spacecraft became a ballet of precision. Components manufactured in different states and countries had to fit together with exacting tolerances. Inspectors examined joints, circuits, and seals with obsessive intensity. The spacecraft wasn't simply built, it was curated, crafted layer by layer to withstand a journey that pushed every known limit. The process resembled art as much as engineering, blending mathematical rigor with human intuition. Public anticipation grew as the program approached its most decisive tests. Each milestone, unmanned launches, orbital missions, docking trials, and lunar orbit demonstrations, brought humanity one step closer to witnessing something unprecedented. News broadcasts, magazine covers, and scientific journals captured the growing excitement. After years of relentless effort, the dream of touching the Moon transformed from speculation into expectation. By the time Apollo 11 launched in 1969, the architecture behind the mission represented one of the most sophisticated machines ever assembled. Every system had been tested, reviewed, and refined through an extraordinary collaboration of scientists, engineers, technicians, and astronauts. The spacecraft carried not only human passengers, but also decades of accumulated knowledge, perseverance, and sacrifice. Each component stood as a testament to the ingenuity of thousands. Understanding the engineering behind Apollo reveals why the conspiracy theories failed to grasp the true scope of the achievement. The complexity alone makes the idea of fabrication implausible. Too many eyes, too many minds, and too many interlinked components were involved for the operation to be anything other than genuine. The effort was too immense, too distributed, and too public to be faked. Still, the narrative of the moon landing extends beyond pure engineering. It incorporates psychology, politics, culture, and the intricate dance between awe and doubt. To grasp the complete picture, we must now move toward the voices that shaped public perception, the reactions, misinterpretations, fears, and hopes that swirled around the mission as humanity prepared to leave its homeworld. The next phase of our journey leads directly into this human response, how the public watched, wondered, doubted, and believed as the moon landing approached. As the Apollo program advanced, public anticipation reached a level unmatched in scientific history. People across the world exchanged cautious optimism, imagining what it might feel like to witness humans step onto another celestial body. Television networks devoted entire segments to the upcoming mission, presenting interviews, diagrams, and predictions that blended science with storytelling. This growing fascination reflected more than curiosity. It represented a collective desire to see humanity transcend the tensions that had shaped the century. For many, the moon became a symbol of unity, a reminder that even divided nations could share the same sky. In living rooms across the United States, families followed every update with a mix of hope and anxiety. Some viewed the progression of Apollo as proof that human intelligence could overcome even the harshest obstacles. Others approached it with caution, worried about the risks. Space travel still felt dangerously new, and memories of failed tests lingered in public consciousness. The thought of astronauts being sent into such uncertainty carried its own emotional weight. Despite this unease, millions tuned in each time a launch approached, unable to resist the gravitational pull of possibility. International reactions were equally profound. Although the space race began as an intense geopolitical rivalry, people around the world grew captivated by the idea of humans leaving Earth for the first time. Newspapers in Europe highlighted the mission as a turning point in modern civilization. Communities in Asia followed the developments closely, fascinated by the engineering behind the endeavor. Even countries with minimal involvement in space exploration celebrated the growing momentum, recognizing that the journey belonged not only to one nation but to the entire species. The Soviet Union watched with complex emotions. Their program had experienced early triumphs, yet the United States was rapidly gaining ground. Soviet scientists understood the magnitude of what was unfolding. They respected the difficulty of the mission more than most. Although their government rarely acknowledged American successes in public, internal documents later revealed admiration for NASA's achievements. Competition created distance, but the shared pursuit of discovery fostered a quiet, mutual respect among engineers and space enthusiasts on both sides. Media coverage shaped public perception from the beginning. Television anchors spoke in solemn tones, matching the gravity of the missions. Newspapers printed diagrams showing orbital mechanics, lunar trajectories, and spacecraft components. These explanations attempted to bridge the gap between complex engineering and everyday understanding. Still, not everyone could grasp the technical details. This mismatch between scientific communication and public comprehension formed the earliest cracks where doubt would later take root, although few recognized it at the time. Art also absorbed the unfolding story. Painters, writers, and filmmakers incorporated space imagery into their work, exploring the emotional dimension of leaving Earth. These creative interpretations amplified the sense of wonder surrounding the missions, often portraying the moon as a place of mystery and transformation. Audiences embraced these artistic visions, using them to imagine what astronauts might see, feel, or think once they touched the lunar surface. This fusion of inspiration and speculation contributed to a cultural atmosphere unlike any in history. Religious leaders added their own interpretations. Some considered space exploration an expression of divine curiosity, a sign that humanity was meant to seek knowledge beyond Earth. Others viewed it with skepticism, questioning whether such ambition conflicted with spiritual humility. These differing perspectives shaped conversations within communities, blending scientific progress with philosophical reflection. The moon landing became a canvas where society projected its hopes, fears, and beliefs. Amid the anticipation, concerns about cost persisted. Critics argued that the billions spent on Apollo could have been used to address social issues, poverty, and inequality. Supporters countered that the technological advancements from space research improved medicine, communication, computing, and countless aspects of daily life. This debate highlighted the fundamental question beneath the mission. Should humanity invest in exploration during times of turmoil, or should it focus solely on immediate needs? The Apollo program challenged that assumption by demonstrating that innovation often produces benefits far beyond its original scope. Education played a significant role throughout this era. Schools used the space race to inspire students, encouraging them to pursue careers in engineering, mathematics, and physics. Children sketched rockets in notebooks, dreaming of joining the next generation of explorers. Teachers incorporated rocket science into lessons, explaining gravity, orbit, and propulsion with renewed excitement. The promise of touching the moon ignited imaginations in ways no textbook alone could achieve, nurturing a generation that would later advance computing, flight, and technology. Broadcast rehearsals prepared the world for the moment of launch. Networks coordinated camera setups, signal paths, and commentary schedules, ensuring the event would be accessible to millions. The complexity of sharing the mission in real time demonstrated the technological progress humanity had already achieved. As July 1969 approached, this synchronized anticipation bound viewers together, creating a shared experience across time zones, languages, and cultures. Despite the excitement, skepticism simmered beneath the surface. Some individuals found it difficult to imagine such an extraordinary achievement happening within a single decade. They questioned whether humans truly possessed the capability to overcome the immense technical challenges. Others doubted the motives behind the mission, interpreting it as a political performance rather than a scientific pursuit. These concerns weren't rooted in conspiracy, but in uncertainty, the kind that naturally arises when reality surpasses imagination. Psychologists observed a curious phenomenon during this time. People often respond to groundbreaking events with disbelief before acceptance. When the human mind confronts something unprecedented, it sometimes rejects it instinctively. The moon landing confronted that threshold. It presented a scenario so unfamiliar that some felt compelled to question its possibility. Their doubts reflected cognitive limitations rather than evidence, revealing how the mind struggles to adapt to rapid change. Still, the majority embraced the mission with a mixture of wonder and national pride. The idea that humans might soon set foot on another world inspired conversations across every demographic. Taxi drivers discussed propulsion systems. College students debated the ethics of exploration. Families gathered around dinner tables speculating about astronaut experiences. This widespread engagement demonstrated the unifying power of scientific ambition. bridging political divides through shared curiosity. Film studios contributed to the era's atmosphere with new depictions of space exploration. Movies showcased astronauts overcoming challenges, spacecraft gliding through darkness, and distant worlds waiting to be discovered. Although fictional, these portrayals shaped expectations for the real mission. When people eventually watched Apollo footage, the visual similarities between fiction and reality created an unexpected complication. Some viewers struggled to separate cinematic imagination from genuine achievement. Government messaging sometimes unintentionally heightened confusion. Press briefings occasionally used technical language that felt inaccessible to general audiences. Explanations about vacuum physics, exposure settings, or spacecraft trajectories were clear to specialists but unclear to those without scientific backgrounds. This communication gap widened as more details emerged, leaving some individuals unsure which aspects they truly understood and which they only thought they understood. At the same time, journalists frequently simplified complex information to make it more digestible. While well-intentioned, this often led to inaccuracies or oversimplifications that further muddied public understanding. A single phrasing error or misinterpreted diagram could foster misunderstanding. These small inconsistencies later became seeds for conspiracy theories, though they were never evidence of deception, only evidence of imperfect communication. As launch day approached, emotional tension grew. The world held its breath, aware that every milestone of the mission involved risk. Astronauts prepared quietly, carrying the weight of global expectation. Their families faced the reality that these missions were not symbolic gestures, they carried genuine danger. This duality, excitement woven with vulnerability, defined the atmosphere around the Apollo program in the days leading to the historic launch. The public watched as the spacecraft was positioned on the launch pad, towering against the morning sky. Photographs of the Saturn V circulated worldwide, captivating everyone from school children to world leaders. It symbolized human possibility, a creation so enormous, so powerful, that it almost felt unreal. That sense of disbelief, though awe-inspiring, would later become part of the emotional foundation behind certain doubts. Nighttime broadcasts highlighted the astronauts' final preparations, narrators speaking softly as they described checklists, suit fittings, and communication tests. These broadcasts carried an intimacy rarely associated with national events. They invited viewers into the quiet spaces where the astronauts gathered their thoughts, reinforcing the human dimension of the mission. Watching these preparations gave the world a glimpse of vulnerability that contrasted sharply with the mission's technological grandeur. When dawn finally broke over Florida on July 16th of 1969, millions prepared to witness a moment they would never forget. Radios crackled, television screens warmed, families gathered, silently aware that history was converging into a single point in time. The air was thick with expectation, not only for the launch but for what it represented. Humanity was on the verge of crossing a boundary older than civilization itself. Understanding the emotions surrounding Apollo 11 is essential to understanding why some later questioned it. Environments filled with excitement and uncertainty often produce interpretations as varied as the people experiencing them. To see how doubt grew, we must continue forward into the launch, the journey, and the unfolding events that became the defining moment of modern exploration. The path ahead leads toward ignition, ascent, and the long voyage through space, where reality becomes more astonishing than anything conspiracy could ever rewrite. The morning of July 16, 1969, carried a sense of anticipation that felt almost unreal. Cape Kennedy buzzed softly with activity, as if the ground itself recognized the significance of what was about to unfold. Reporters whispered updates, engineers exchanged quiet nods, and spectators gathered by the thousands. Above them, the Saturn V stood poised, towering against a pale sky. It was more than a rocket. It was a symbol of humanity's attempt to reach beyond the familiar, to touch a destination once reserved for myth and imagination. Inside the spacecraft, the astronauts settled into their seats, surrounded by switches, displays, and the muted hum of systems awakening. The minutes leading to launch passed with deliberate calm. Their voices remained steady as they worked through final procedures, aware that each confirmation echoed across control rooms worldwide. Despite the complexities surrounding them, the astronauts carried a serenity forged through years of preparation. Their resolve acted as a quiet counterbalance to the tension outside, where millions waited in silence. Along coastlines and crowded fields, families sat shoulder to shoulder, shielding their eyes from the morning sun as they watched the massive rocket shimmering in the heat. Radios crackled with commentary, blending technical updates with breathless excitement. The world seemed to slow, every heartbeat syncing with the countdown. Even those who doubted the mission's purpose found themselves drawn into the collective anticipation. Something about the moment commanded attention, as though history itself had paused to witness what would happen next. The countdown progressed, each number pulling viewers closer to a boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary. At 0, the engines ignited with a force that shook the ground, creating a spectacle of fire and sound unlike anything the world had ever seen. The rocket lifted slowly, almost reluctantly, before rising with accelerating confidence. People watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief, aware that human beings were now riding atop a controlled inferno powerful enough to send them into deep space. Television cameras tracked the soaring vehicle as it pierced the sky, trails of white vapor curling behind it. For viewers watching from their homes, the sight felt dreamlike. The scale of the event surpassed imagination, making it difficult to fully grasp that the tiny shape ascending into the heavens carried 3 members of their own species. This emotional contrast, intimacy within immensity, turned the launch into a moment that transcended politics, technology, and national boundaries. Once the rocket shared its lower stages and reached orbit, the world exhaled collectively. The first major hurdle had been overcome. Broadcasts relayed updates from mission control, showing calm faces illuminated by rows of glowing monitors. Each controller followed precise procedures, ensuring the spacecraft remained on course. Their voices, steady and rhythmic, became a reassuring soundtrack for millions listening across the globe. The quiet competence displayed in these rooms offered a glimpse into the dedication that made the mission possible. The spacecraft drifted in low Earth orbit before initiating the burn that would propel it toward the moon. This maneuver, known as translunar injection, required perfect timing. Observers around the world listened as mission control confirmed the ignition. The spacecraft accelerated beyond Earth's embrace, beginning a journey that carried it into a region few humans had ever entered. The steady voice announcing the successful maneuver carried both relief and pride, resonating with audiences who felt they were part of the voyage. During the translunar coast, the astronauts performed checks, photographed Earth, and adjusted systems as needed. Their conversations reflected the calm professionalism that defined the mission. They described the view of Earth shrinking to a glowing sphere suspended in blackness, a sight that often evokes philosophical reflection among those who witness it. For viewers learning about these moments later, the descriptions added a poetic dimension to the mission, expanding its emotional depth. Observers on Earth followed every update with fascination. Newspapers published diagrams illustrating the spacecraft's trajectory through cislunar space. Television networks used models and animations to explain how the craft moved along its path. Although these presentations couldn't capture the full elegance of orbital mechanics, They helped bridge the gap between scientific reality and public understanding. People who had never studied physics found themselves discussing thrust vectors and velocity changes with surprising enthusiasm. The astronauts documented their surroundings with photographs that would later become iconic. Images of Earth suspended in darkness struck viewers with unexpected emotion, revealing a fragile, unified world seen from afar. These pictures became symbolic representations of humanity's shared home, subtly reinforcing a sense of connection across continents. They also played a role in the growing environmental movement, reminding people that life existed on a delicate sphere floating through emptiness. Mission Control monitored every aspect of the spacecraft's condition. Temperature, oxygen levels, fuel reserves, electrical flow. Each parameter was scrutinized. Controllers operated with disciplined focus, aware that the smallest anomaly could demand immediate action. The precision required to maintain safety illuminated the reality behind the mission. This was not a show or a staged performance. It was a complex interplay of physics, engineering, and human judgment unfolding moment by moment. Public interest remained intense as the spacecraft approached the moon. Audiences tracked the mission through newspapers delivered daily, radio broadcasts transmitted hourly, and television updates offered throughout the evening. People who typically paid little attention to science found themselves captivated by orbital calculations, tracking progress across diagrams published in magazines. The mission bridged the gap between experts and ordinary viewers, transforming complex operations into a shared story. When the spacecraft slipped behind the moon for the first time, communications temporarily ceased. The world held its breath during those minutes, waiting for the signal to return. This moment of silence felt both suspenseful and humbling. It reminded everyone that space remained vast, unpredictable, and indifferent to human ambition. When communication resumed, cheers erupted across control rooms and living rooms alike. The sense of connection between Earth and its travelers returned with renewed force. As the spacecraft entered lunar orbit, the astronauts prepared for tasks that demanded extreme concentration. They reviewed checklists, studied landing procedures, and monitored systems with methodical precision. The rhythm of preparation offered viewers a glimpse into professional discipline shaped by years of training. For many watching from afar, these glimpses brought a sense of authenticity that no staged production could replicate. People worldwide pondered what the astronauts must have felt as they orbited a world no human had ever touched. Poetry, philosophy, and science blended into speculative conversations shared among friends and families. Some imagined the quiet beauty of the lunar surface, others the solitude of space, others the weight of responsibility carried by the crew. These reflections fostered an emotional connection to the mission that enriched the experience beyond scientific interest. Yet beneath the excitement, unease persisted among certain viewers. The scale of the mission appeared so monumental that it felt almost surreal. When achievements transcend ordinary comprehension, disbelief sometimes follows. This psychological response forms a subtle foundation on which future doubts can grow. Many people today underestimate how overwhelming these events felt in real time, especially for those witnessing such advancements for the first time in human history. The journey toward the lunar surface demanded extraordinary precision. The lunar module's separation from the command module represented a critical step, one that required calm coordination. As the two spacecraft drifted apart, Mission Control monitored every signal. The public followed the moment with hushed anticipation, aware of the risks surrounding the maneuver. The separation symbolized the narrowing of focus, two astronauts preparing to descend onto a landscape humanity had only seen from afar. Back on Earth, viewers contemplated the enormity of the mission, They realized that the astronauts were now farther from home than any human had ever been, separated by distance, silence, and vacuum. This awareness stirred a mixture of admiration and vulnerability. The bravery required to take such a step reflected a depth of courage that resonated across cultures, inspiring awe even in those who doubted the mission's necessity. The lunar module's descent would soon test every system aboard the craft. Guidance computers, radar instruments, thrusters, and life support equipment all needed to perform flawlessly. Engineers, technicians, and flight controllers prepared to guide the astronauts through the most delicate phase of their journey. Their readiness demonstrated the collaborative strength behind Apollo, a strength built through countless tests, failures, adjustments, and triumphs. As anticipation intensified, the world once again drew closer to its screens. Viewers sensed that the next phase would redefine the boundaries of human achievement. The astronauts were about to attempt something that blended physics, courage, and delicate engineering in equal measure. Humanity stood on the edge of a moment that had been imagined for generations, waiting to see whether it would unfold as hoped. Before the landing could occur, the lunar module needed to perform a series of precise burns to adjust its altitude and velocity. These maneuvers required absolute synchronization between manual control and automated systems. Each successful adjustment strengthened the public's trust in the mission, demonstrating the remarkable harmony between humans and machines. Even without fully grasping the technical details, viewers felt the significance of each successful milestone. A sense of quiet determination grew in mission control as the craft approached its descent point. Controllers exchanged brief phrases, focusing entirely on their data streams. The rhythm of their communication became almost meditative, reflecting the level of concentration required. For those listening, their tone conveyed confidence rooted in preparation, offering reassurance amid the tension. The world braced for the descent, aware that the next steps would push human ingenuity to its limits. People leaned closer to their screens and radios, sensing the weight of approaching history. The atmosphere, charged but silent, created a global stillness unlike anything experienced before or since. Humanity was on the threshold of touching another world. The journey to this threshold had been long, intricate, and filled with wonder. Yet the most iconic moment of the mission, the attempt to land on the moon, still waited ahead. To understand why the landing left such an enduring impact, we must now move into the heart of that descent, where danger, precision, and hope converged in a single sequence of events. As the lunar module approached its descent orbit, the atmosphere inside mission control shifted into a deeper stillness. Every controller leaned closer to their monitor, aware that the next minutes would decide the outcome of a decade-long effort. The spacecraft was about to enter a zone where no test or simulation could perfectly replicate the conditions. The moon's surface, shaped by billions of years of meteoritic impacts, offered no guarantees. Even the most confident engineers recognized that uncertainty was an intrinsic part of this moment. Inside the lunar module, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin worked in synchronized calm. Each motion reflected practiced discipline, from verifying instrument readings to aligning the guidance system. Their heart rates, though elevated, remained impressively controlled, a testament to the intense training that had conditioned them for these conditions. The module's interior felt small and quiet, illuminated by the soft glow of instrument panels. Through the small triangular windows, the lunar surface appeared as a shifting mosaic of shadows and pale terrain. Mission Control monitored telemetry as the craft initiated its powered descent. The voice updates maintained a steady cadence, describing altitude, velocity, and fuel consumption. These numbers were not just data points. They were clues indicating how closely reality matched their predictions. Every slight deviation demanded immediate judgment, and every quick decision accumulated into the overall safety of the mission. The tension was palpable, yet the communication remained composed and deliberate. Partway through the descent, an unexpected alarm flashed across the guidance computer. The 1202 alarm, a code known to indicate potential overloads in the computer's task schedule, briefly caught the astronauts off guard. For a fraction of a second, the stability of the moment seemed to waver. But Mission Control quickly recognized the alarm from training sessions. It meant the computer was prioritizing critical tasks and shedding non-essential ones. Not a failure, but a sign that it was doing exactly what it had been programmed to do. Confidence returned as controllers relayed reassurance to the crew. The alarm appeared again, then again, but always with the same interpretation: continue. This exchange demonstrated the resilience of the system and the depth of preparation behind the mission. For viewers who learned about the alarms afterward, these moments became symbols of the razor-thin margins that framed the landing. The fact that everything continued smoothly only reinforced the precision behind the operation. As the module continued descending, Armstrong noticed that the designated landing site looked dangerously uneven. A field of large boulders stretched across the intended touchdown zone, an unwelcome discovery this late in the process. Without hesitation, he took manual control, guiding the module toward a safer area. His ability to improvise in real time reflected both his piloting expertise and the trust NASA had placed in him. Mission Control watched, unable to intervene, relying entirely on his judgment. Fuel levels dropped as the search for a suitable landing spot continued. Controllers tracked the decreasing reserves, aware that the margin was rapidly narrowing. The world held its breath as the final moments approached. Those watching the descent data on their screens recognized how close the module was getting to its limits. For many, this realization came only later, but for the engineers in the room, these seconds stretched into an eternity of focused attention. Dust began to swirl below the module as its descent engine neared the surface, creating a shifting cloud that blurred visibility. Armstrong relied on shadows and motion cues to estimate altitude, using every fragment of information available. Aldrin announced readings from the radar, supporting the manual adjustments. The combination of instinct, training, and coordinated teamwork formed the delicate balance required to land safely. Mission Control heard the final transmissions from the lunar surface before the radio filled with quiet static. When Armstrong confirmed contact, a wave of relief swept across the room. The iconic phrase, "The Eagle has landed," echoed with understated clarity, carrying immense emotional weight. Engineers who had maintained composure for hours finally allowed themselves to express relief. The achievement represented not only technological triumph, but the culmination of collective human effort. Around the world, celebrations erupted instantly. Viewers cried, cheered, and embraced one another. Stunned that humanity had taken such a monumental step, even those who approached the mission with skepticism felt compelled to acknowledge the significance of the landing. The sight of the lunar module resting on the surface of another world expanded the boundaries of what people believed possible. The news became a shared heartbeat, spreading from city to city in waves of astonished joy. While the world rejoiced, Armstrong and Aldrin prepared for the next stage, stepping outside. They reviewed procedures for depressurizing the cabin, donning their equipment with deliberate precision. Inside the module, every motion felt heavier with the awareness of what awaited beyond the hatch. These final moments before exit carried a reflective quiet, as though the astronauts were standing on the threshold of myth. As Armstrong descended the ladder, Mission Control grew silent. Every controller, every technician, every observer became united by the same stillness. The world watched as his boot hovered above the lunar dust, suspended in a moment that seemed to stretch across time. When his foot finally touched the surface, the line between imagination and reality dissolved. Humanity had crossed the boundary it had stared at for thousands of years. Millions of viewers witnessed the grainy broadcast, mesmerized by the surreal imagery. The harsh lunar lighting, the stark shadows, and the slow movements created an atmosphere that felt otherworldly. Although the footage lacked modern clarity, its imperfections added to its authenticity. It felt unfiltered, raw, and unrepeatable. People understood instinctively that they were watching history unfold in real time. Aldrin soon joined Armstrong, and the two set about their tasks with calm efficiency. They collected samples, photographed the terrain, and installed instruments. These actions, though routine by procedure, felt deeply symbolic. Each scoop of lunar soil represented an expansion of human knowledge. Every photograph captured a perspective no person had ever seen with their own eyes. Even the placement of the American flag, though often discussed through political lenses, carried deeper meaning as a marker of collective achievement. Back on Earth, writers, poets, and philosophers struggled to articulate the significance of the moment. Some compared the landing to the first steps of early humans across ancient continents. Others saw it as a new chapter in the story of exploration. Scientists reflected on the wealth of data that would return home. Regardless of perspective, the consensus was clear. Humanity had reached a new frontier, redefining its place in the cosmos. The astronauts performed experiments designed to measure seismic activity, solar wind, and surface composition. These tasks formed the scientific backbone of the mission, demonstrating that Apollo was not merely symbolic, it was an investigation into the moon's history and geology. The information collected continues to influence lunar science today, informing debates about the moon's formation, its thermal evolution, and its relationship with Earth. As they worked, Armstrong and Aldrin occasionally paused to look around, absorbing the view. The horizon appeared closer than it does on Earth due to the moon's smaller size. The sky remained perfectly black, untouched by atmosphere. The sun cast sharp as unsoftened shadows. This environment, both stark and serene, created a sense of solitude unlike anything they had ever experienced. Their reflections captured in later interviews hint at the awe that accompanied their movements. From a distance, Earth hung in the sky as a glowing sphere. Its blues, whites, and subtle browns contrasted against the monochrome landscape. The sight stirred strong emotions within the astronauts. Seeing home suspended in darkness reminded them of its fragility, a world filled with life, weather, history, and meaning. Many later described the view as transformative, altering their understanding of human unity and responsibility. As the surface activities came to an end, the astronauts returned to the lunar module. They carried with them not only samples and data, but the emotional imprint of the experience. The ascent back to lunar orbit would require the same precision as the descent. Once they rejoined the command module, the mission shifted toward its next critical phase, the journey home. On Earth, analysts debated the mission's implications. Some focused on geopolitical significance, others on scientific breakthroughs, others on existential meaning. These varied interpretations revealed the diversity of human thought, demonstrating how a single event can resonate differently across cultures and perspectives. The landing became a mirror, reflecting the values, hopes, and uncertainties of those who observed it. For many, the landing served as a beacon of possibility during a turbulent era. It offered a moment of clarity amid political unrest, social upheaval, and global tension. People found comfort in the idea that humanity could achieve something extraordinary through cooperation. intelligence, and determination. This emotional resonance became one of the mission's most enduring legacies. And yet, while the majority embraced the accomplishment, a small number of observers struggled to reconcile the enormity of what they had witnessed. The landing felt too perfect, too improbable, too far beyond their own understanding. These early doubts didn't yet form a full conspiracy, but they planted seeds that would later grow into a narrative built on misunderstandings and psychological responses. To understand how those seeds took root, we must now explore the interplay between perception, misunderstanding, and the human mind's tendency to question what it cannot fully grasp. The path ahead leads toward the origins of the moon landing skepticism, not in evidence, but in emotion. In the weeks following the moon landing, most of the world continued celebrating. Newspapers printed full-page spreads, television stations replayed the footage, and families revisited their memories of watching the historic moment unfold. Yet amid the global admiration, a subtle undercurrent of uncertainty emerged. Some individuals couldn't fully reconcile what they had seen. The experience felt unreal, almost theatrical, and this sense of unreality planted the earliest seeds of questioning, not out of defiance, but out of cognitive dissonance. The human mind often reacts strangely to monumental events. When reality exceeds what someone believes to be possible, the instinctive response can be disbelief rather than wonder. Psychologists call this phenomenon threshold disbelief, the moment when an event sits so far outside personal experience that it feels more like fiction than fact. For those unfamiliar with the scale of engineering behind Apollo, the landing triggered exactly this response. The achievement seemed too vast, too rapid, too extraordinary. Another factor influencing early doubts was the quality of the broadcast itself. The footage transmitted from the lunar surface appeared grainy, washed out, and heavily contrasted. Equipment limitations, radio signal distance, and real-time conversion all degraded the image. Viewers accustomed to crisp Hollywood cinematography found the authenticity of the footage difficult to intuitively grasp. Ironically, the lack of clarity, a limitation of technology, strengthened the illusion that something wasn't quite right. People often compare what they see to what they already know. During the 1960s, science fiction films featuring detailed space sets were widely popular. Audiences had seen artificial moons, star fields, and spacecraft on screen long before Apollo 11. When the real footage mimicked certain visual qualities of those films, not because it was staged, but because cinematic depictions had borrowed from scientific imagery, some viewers misinterpreted the similarity as evidence of fabrication. The overlap between art and reality confused perceptions. Misunderstandings grew when certain photographs showed unusual lighting or unexpected shadow behavior. On the moon, shadows fall sharply due to the lack of atmosphere, creating visual patterns unfamiliar to most people. The surface isn't smooth but uneven, causing shadows to stretch and bend in ways that defy intuition. Without knowing the physics behind these phenomena, individuals sometimes interpreted natural optical effects as inconsistencies. Small misconceptions morphed into questions that echoed across conversations and communities. A related cognitive bias strengthened these doubts. Argument from ignorance, the tendency to assume something is false if one cannot personally explain it. When viewers couldn't immediately interpret the strange appearance of lunar dust or the absence of stars in photographs, they sometimes concluded that the mission must have been staged. Instead of viewing unfamiliar details as opportunities for learning, they subconsciously treated them as evidence of deception. Social environments influenced interpretation as well. Groups of friends, co-workers, or small communities sometimes discussed the landing with a playful skepticism that gradually hardened into belief. A casual remark like, "It almost looks like a movie set," could, when repeated enough times, transform into genuine suspicion. Doubt often spreads through conversation, not evidence, because hearing uncertainty expressed by others creates a sense of legitimacy around the idea. The distrust toward government institutions during the 1960s and 1970s further complicated things. Political scandals, secrecy surrounding military projects, and shifting public attitudes eroded confidence. In such climates, people sometimes generalize distrust across unrelated fields. If they doubted one institution, they extended that doubt toward others, including agencies like NASA. Even though NASA operated transparently, the broader cultural mood made it easier for conspiracy narratives to take root. A small number of early skeptics began writing letters, speaking on radio shows, or publishing pamphlets that questioned the authenticity of the mission. These individuals were not necessarily malicious. Many simply misunderstood scientific concepts or underestimated the technological capabilities of the era. Their arguments relied heavily on intuition and analogy, comparing lunar conditions to everyday Earth-based experiences that didn't apply. But for listeners unfamiliar with physics, these intuitive explanations felt accessible and persuasive. As these skeptical voices gained attention, their claims spread through niche communities fascinated by mysteries. People drawn to the unexplained, UFO sightings, paranormal events, and cryptic stories found the idea of a faked moon landing intriguing. It fit neatly into a worldview where hidden truths waited to be uncovered. The moon landing conspiracy became another puzzle to analyze, not because evidence pointed in that direction, but because mystery itself was compelling. For some, conspiracy theories offer a sense of empowerment. They create a narrative where believers feel they possess special insight into hidden realities. This psychological appeal is powerful, especially during times of social turmoil or personal uncertainty. Believing the moon landing was staged gave certain individuals a feeling of being in the know, as though they had pierced a veil others could not see through. Instead of seeking explanation, they sought exclusivity. Confirmation bias also played a major role. Once someone entertained the possibility that the landing might be fake, they unconsciously favored information that supported that idea while dismissing evidence that contradicted it. Photographs showing unusual features seemed suspicious. Explanations debunking those suspicions felt unconvincing. This feedback loop strengthened belief, making it increasingly difficult for individuals to reconsider their assumptions. The open nature of the Apollo program unintentionally contributed to confusion. NASA released thousands of photographs, transcripts, and technical documents, believing transparency would build trust. However, the sheer volume of information made it easy for skeptics to cherry-pick unfamiliar or visually confusing images. They could isolate anomalies without understanding the context, creating misleading interpretations that spread more easily than detailed explanations. Over time, early misconceptions began to crystallize into more elaborate narratives. Claims about lighting inconsistencies, flag behavior, missing stars, and photographic anomalies grew into a web of interconnected arguments. Each flawed claim reinforced the others, giving the illusion of a cohesive case. These theories weren't built on evidence, but on the emotional resonance of suspicion and the human tendency to search for patterns, even where none exist. Another important element was the illusion of simplicity. Because the moon landing seemed visually straightforward, astronauts, a spacecraft, a flag, a barren landscape, some people underestimated the complexity of the mission. They didn't see the thousands of engineers, years of research, and massive logistical infrastructure behind the scenes. Without understanding the scale of the program, they assumed it couldn't have happened. This underestimation paradoxically made faking the mission seem easier to imagine than accomplishing it. In certain communities, joking skepticism gradually evolved into sincere belief. What began as playful curiosity shifted into persistent doubt as individuals repeated the same misconceptions over time. Repetition gives ideas staying power, especially when those ideas provoke emotion or fascination. For some, the conspiracy became part of their identity, a story they carried not because it was factual, but because it felt meaningful. The growing presence of these doubts did not diminish the reality of Apollo. Instead, it reflected the psychological complexity of witnessing unprecedented events. When people encounter something outside their personal framework of understanding, their minds search for narratives that help bridge the gap. Conspiracies step into that space, providing explanations that feel coherent even when they lack substance. Understanding these mechanisms is essential for appreciating how the moon landing conspiracy gained traction. It did not emerge from evidence, but from human perception, intuition, and the emotional need for certainty. To fully understand how these doubts evolved into a global phenomenon, we must now move into the era where these claims found new life: the rise of documentaries, early internet forums, and the modern amplification of misinformation. The path ahead leads toward the digital age, where old misconceptions transformed into viral narratives. When the internet began spreading into homes around the world, it reshaped how people shared stories. Suddenly, ideas no longer needed traditional gatekeepers, editors, journalists, or scientific organizations. Instead, any opinion, any rumor, any interpretation could move freely from one screen to another. The moon landing conspiracy, once a fringe belief kept alive by small groups, found a new landscape perfectly suited for its growth. It didn't need to be accurate to thrive, it only needed to be interesting. Early online forums became the fertile soil where curiosity and confusion intertwined. Message boards built around mysteries, science fiction, or unconventional theories offered spaces where people could discuss their doubts without the pressure of scrutiny. In these communities, questioning the moon landing felt less like a fringe idea and more like a shared puzzle. Participants exchanged blurry images, misunderstood physics, and speculative interpretations, building a collective narrative out of fragmented pieces. As the internet grew, search engines introduced a new dynamic: discovery through interest. When someone searched for information about the moon landing, algorithms didn't distinguish between credible sources and sensational claims. They simply delivered pages that matched keywords. If a user clicked on conspiracy-themed content, the algorithm assumed they preferred that kind of material and began recommending more. Curiosity quickly became a loop, gradually reshaping what users believed to be the most relevant information. Video platforms accelerated this transformation. Short, dramatic clips claiming to expose hidden truths captured attention more easily than detailed scientific explanations. A well-edited video suggesting the moon landing was staged could feel more convincing than a technical document explaining lunar physics. The contrast between entertainment and complexity often tilted in favor of entertainment, drawing viewers deeper into simplified narratives crafted to provoke emotion rather than understanding. The rise of social media amplified these effects dramatically. Platforms designed to prioritize engagement, likes, shares, comments, unintentionally rewarded posts that generated strong emotional responses. Conspiracy theories excelled in this environment because they triggered a blend of shock, intrigue, and skepticism. A single provocative post could reach millions within hours, spreading far beyond the communities where the ideas originally formed. Memes, with their simplicity and humor, became another vehicle for misinformation. A joking image suggesting astronauts used a film studio could circulate widely, detached from context. For some viewers, it remained harmless humor. For others, it subtly reinforced pre-existing doubts. The fine line between irony and belief blurred, especially in environments where repetition made even implausible ideas feel strangely familiar. Psychologists have found that people tend to trust content shared by friends more than content from institutions. This meant that even if NASA released clear explanations or detailed evidence, a viewer might give more weight to a friend's skeptical post. The emotional closeness created an illusion of reliability, even when the information was inaccurate. In this way, misinformation bypassed expertise and gained legitimacy through social bonds. Echo chambers formed naturally through algorithmic filtering. When individuals engaged repeatedly with conspiracy-themed content, their digital environment adapted. They saw fewer scientific explanations and more videos, articles, and posts reinforcing the idea of a hoax. Over time, it became difficult for them to encounter differing perspectives at all. Their online world narrowed into a self-reinforcing belief system where doubt felt like truth and truth felt like propaganda. The psychological mechanism behind this shift is known as availability cascades. When repeated exposure to a claim makes it feel more credible simply because it's familiar. Even without evidence, repetition creates the illusion of substance. Online, where content spreads rapidly and endlessly, this effect multiplies. Claims that might once have seemed fringe quickly gained an aura of plausibility. Another force behind the resurgence of conspiracy theories was the growing distrust toward authority that defined the early 21st century. Political polarization, economic instability, and social upheaval led many to question traditional institutions. In such climates, conspiratorial narratives thrive because they offer simple explanations for complex problems. The moon landing hoax theory, already embedded in popular culture, resurfaced as a convenient symbol of institutional deceit, even though the evidence overwhelmingly supported the authenticity of Apollo. Humans also gravitate toward stories that give them a sense of agency or mastery. Believing a conspiracy can feel like possessing secret insight, as though the believer has pierced a veil others cannot see through. This psychological reward makes such narratives appealing, especially for individuals feeling overlooked or powerless. A sense of intellectual rebellion often accompanies conspiratorial thinking, transforming doubt into identity. The aesthetics of internet content played a role as well. Dark thumbnails, ominous music, and dramatic voiceovers created a mood of urgency and intrigue. These emotional cues primed viewers to interpret information through a lens of suspicion. Even mundane NASA artifacts could seem suspicious when presented with foreboding visuals. The narrative mattered more than the facts, because the emotional experience shaped interpretation. Over time, influential online voices emerged, creators who specialized in analyzing mysteries, secrets, or hidden truths. Their audiences trusted them deeply, sometimes more than mainstream sources. When these creators questioned the moon landing, their followers adopted those doubts, not because evidence supported the claims, but because trust had shifted from institutions to individuals with strong online presence and charismatic storytelling. Meanwhile, scientific explanations often struggled to gain similar traction. Real evidence tends to be complex, nuanced, and less emotionally stimulating. The physics behind lunar shadows, radio transmission delays, or regolith behavior requires patience to understand. In contrast, conspiratorial claims offer simple answers that feel intuitive. This mismatch created an environment where misinformation spread quickly, while accurate explanations felt laborious by comparison. International influence, further diversified the narrative. Countries with tense historical relationships with the United States sometimes used the conspiracy theory as a political tool, subtly promoting the idea through documentaries or online content. These international narratives added new layers of doubt, contributing to a global resurgence of skepticism that extended far beyond the original American context. Celebrity culture also played a surprising role. Occasional comments from public figures, even casual or joking remarks, reignited discussions. Because celebrities command such large audiences, even brief mentions of skepticism reached millions. The Kim Kardashian incident became a perfect example. An offhand comment sparked debates across social media, overshadowing decades of scientific evidence simply because the voice expressing doubt was famous. This amplification illustrates an important truth about the digital era. Influence often outweighs expertise. In online spaces, ideas don't gain traction because they're accurate. They spread because they resonate. A conspiracy theory about the moon landing doesn't need to withstand scrutiny. It only needs to be emotionally compelling, easily shared, and packaged in a way that feels intriguing. As the digital landscape matured, a strange duality emerged. On one side were vast scientific archives, photographs, mission logs, engineering documents, lunar samples, seismometer data, independent telescope observations. On the other side were short, dramatic videos suggesting it was all a ruse. And though the scientific evidence vastly outweighed the conspiratorial claims, the emotional design of online platforms made the latter more visible, more viral, and more persistent. Today, the moon landing conspiracy continues to circulate, not because people lack information, but because information alone cannot counter emotional narratives. Belief is shaped by identity, trust, community, and the stories people choose to embrace. Understanding this dynamic is essential before examining the strongest evidence of all, the independent, unmistakable, scientifically irrefutable proof that Apollo did exactly what it claimed. Which leads us gently into what comes next. The quiet, steady, overwhelmingly consistent evidence that only a real moon landing could produce. Long before modern debates filled timelines and comment sections, the moon landing had already woven itself into the fabric of physical reality, not as a myth or a heroic tale, but as a trail of measurable, verifiable footprints scattered across space. Every mission left behind something the universe could reflect back to us, something that didn't rely on politics, reputation, or public opinion. In the quiet language of physics, the proof has been there all along. Patient, unbothered, and immune to arguments. One of the most striking pieces of evidence rests in beams of light that stretch from Earth to the Moon and return again. During Apollo missions, astronauts placed retroreflectors, mirrored panels designed to bounce laser pulses perfectly back to their source, onto the lunar surface. Today, observatories around the world continue to fire lasers at those reflectors, measuring the distance to the Moon with astonishing precision. These beams hit the panels and return in predictable patterns. No studio on Earth could place functioning reflectors on the Moon, because they require an actual presence on the lunar soil. This experiment, known as lunar laser ranging, has been running for more than 50 years. It has recorded subtle shifts in the Moon's orbit, confirmed its slow drift away from Earth at about 3.8 centimeters per year, and contributed to tests of general relativity. The reflectors don't care about trending topics or online arguments. They respond only to the laws of optics and the silence of space, quietly signaling that humans once stood where only craters and dust existed. Another undeniable trail emerges from lunar rocks brought back by the Apollo missions. These samples, studied by laboratories across Earth, possess chemical compositions unlike anything found here. Their isotopic ratios match the scientific model of the Moon's formation, a collision between early Earth and a Mars-sized object. They contain traces of solar wind accumulated over billions of years due to the Moon's lack of atmosphere, something impossible to reproduce artificially. Their textures, microstructures, and embedded glass spheres reveal exposure to meteor impacts and cosmic radiation in a way that Earth's environment cannot replicate. International scientists, including those from countries that were once rivals of the United States, have examined these rocks. Their conclusions are consistent. The samples are undeniably lunar. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union received pieces of Apollo material for research. If there had been deception, no nation would have scrutinized the evidence more closely than a geopolitical adversary with every incentive to expose a lie. Yet the analysis confirmed authenticity again and again. High-resolution lunar reconnaissance from modern satellites adds another layer of proof. NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, along with imaging from countries like Japan, India, and China, has photographed Apollo landing sites in extraordinary detail. These images reveal footpaths, descent stages, rover tracks, and scientific instruments still resting where astronauts left them. Shadows of equipment align with the sun's angle, textures of disturbed soil spread outward from the landing zones. These aren't digital artifacts, they're physical scars etched into the Moon's untouched terrain. Seismometers left by astronauts continued sending data long after the missions ended. They recorded moonquakes, meteor strikes, and internal vibrations that helped map the Moon's interior structure. These instruments transmitted independently of NASA's public image or political narratives. They operated because they were real devices placed on a real lunar surface. Their decades of data helped shape modern lunar geology, influencing research across countries and institutions that had no stake in American prestige. Radio transmissions from the missions were tracked by observatories around the world, including those not affiliated with NASA. Amateur radio operators, scientific organizations, and international space agencies independently recorded signals, triangulated positions, and monitored spacecraft trajectories. These transmissions confirmed spacecraft movement precisely along the paths NASA reported. No global coordination could have forged such detailed, physics-consistent communication patterns across thousands of independent receivers. The engineering behind the Saturn V rocket offers another silent testament. The thrust required to escape Earth's gravity, the fuel demands, and the telemetry logs all align with an actual lunar mission. Engineers from countries outside the United States studied declassified data and found no inconsistencies. The physics simply would not permit an elaborate hoax involving non-existent engines, imaginary trajectories, or falsified accelerations. Rockets either perform or they don't. The Saturn V performed exactly as documented. Decades of scientific papers emerged from Apollo data, shaping fields such as planetary science, seismology, and astrophysics. These papers weren't written by NASA employees alone. Researchers across continents used Apollo results to build careers, develop new hypotheses, and compare findings with independent data sets. The scientific ecosystem, built through peer review and cross-validation, would have collapsed instantly if the foundational data had been fabricated. Even the dust itself tells the truth. Lunar regolith behaves very differently from terrestrial soil. Its grains are sharp, electrostatically clingy, and shaped by billions of years of micrometeorite impacts. The way it scattered under astronauts' boots, how it clung to spacesuits, and how it reacted to the lander's descent cannot be faked in air, water, or gravity. Every speck carries the unmistakable signature of a world untouched by weather or erosion. Photographs from the missions, sometimes claimed to be studio fabrications, also follow the physics of lunar light flawlessly. Shadows fall exactly as expected in a vacuum without atmospheric diffusion. Brightness contrasts match the reflective properties of lunar dust. Lens flares, exposure differences, and horizon curvature behave precisely as they should under harsh sunlight and low gravity. Forensic image analysts have repeatedly demonstrated that recreating these conditions artificially is extraordinarily difficult, requiring environments far more complex than any film set. Independent experiments performed later on Earth retroactively validated what Apollo astronauts measured firsthand. Radiation levels, magnetic anomalies, and thermal gradients aligned with predictions only possible if the missions were genuine. These lines of evidence converge from every discipline: geology, physics, engineering, astronomy, weaving a consistent tapestry that cannot be explained by coincidence or fabrication. The most telling proof may be the simplest: no whistleblower ever emerged. The Apollo program involved more than 400,000 people: engineers, technicians, contractors, scientists, military trackers, radio operators, and countless specialists working in interconnected roles. Sustaining a lie of such magnitude for over half a century, across administrations, political parties, international collaborations, and public scrutiny, would be statistically impossible. Large-scale conspiracies collapse under the weight of human inconsistency. Real achievements endure. All of this evidence flows together gently, forming a picture that becomes increasingly calming the longer you rest with it. The moon landing doesn't need defending. It stands securely in the physical world. The doubt surrounding it came from culture, psychology, and digital distortion. But the event itself is as solid as the rocks astronauts held in their gloved hands. And as these threads of evidence settle into focus, they guide the mind toward a quieter realization. The story of Apollo is not just about technology or politics. It's about humans stepping beyond the cradle of their world, leaving delicate traces of their presence in a place where silence reigns. The truth of that journey remains steady, waiting patiently for anyone willing to look. Which leads us gently toward reflection, a soft landing of our own, as we begin to drift into the closing thoughts of this long, quiet exploration. The long journey we've taken tonight settles now into a gentler rhythm, almost like dust drifting through a soft lunar sunrise. You've traveled through the psychology of doubt, the architecture of conspiracies, the engineering of the Saturn V, the silent testimony left on the moon, and the strange ways culture can distort what science builds. As the echoes of each chapter fade, a calmer picture emerges, not loud or triumphant, just steady, enduring, and quietly human. When you return to the beginning of this story, it almost feels distant, like a dream half remembered. A celebrity making an offhand remark, a thread gaining momentum online, a wave of people suddenly unsure about something that happened decades before they were born. It's a reminder of how fragile collective memory can be in a world where entertainment blurs into information. Yet beneath all that noise lies the patient truth of physics, geology, engineering, and light, truths untouched by algorithms or opinions. You've seen how the Apollo missions weren't just photographs and flags, but the result of a massive, intricate symphony of human effort. Hundreds of thousands of minds aligned across a decade, building machines that had never existed, solving equations that had never been attempted, and trusting one another through triumph and tragedy. Nothing about that scale can be shrunk into a simple hoax. And when you rest with that realization, there's something soothing about it. The idea that determination, cooperation, and curiosity can leave marks even on another world. This journey also brought us through the strange landscapes of mistrust, where people search for certainty in the wrong places because the right answers feel too vast to hold. Conspiracy theories often grow in the empty spaces left by fear or confusion. But when the fog clears, what remains is grounded, verifiable and almost comforting. A laser reflecting off silent mirrors on the moon. Rocks that whisper billions of years of cosmic history. Data shared freely across nations that once considered themselves rivals. As these threads intertwine, they form something more than an argument or a defense. They create a sense of belonging to a species capable of stepping off its home world. A species that carried its hopes into the dark, left instruments humming quietly in the lunar soil, and returned with stories written in dust. You and I are part of that lineage, not by walking on the moon ourselves, but by inheriting the meaning of those steps. If this long drift through fact and wonder brought you a moment of ease, a breath of clarity, or simply a quiet space to rest your thoughts, I'm grateful you spent this time here. These calm explorations only exist because someone out there, someone like you, finds comfort in them. And if you feel moved to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, it helps others find their way to this peaceful corner of the universe too. Before you drift off, I'd love to know where you are tonight and what time it is as you listen. Those little glimpses from around the world create a map more beautiful than any star chart. A constellation of quiet minds sharing the same moment, each from a different latitude and life. And now, as the last echoes settle, let your thoughts soften and expand. The truth of our journey, like the gentle light reflected off lunar dust, doesn't fade with doubt. It lingers, steady and patient, waiting for anyone who chooses to look up. May your night be peaceful, your dreams weightless, and your curiosity always open to the sky.